Hey, good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Got my cup of coffee in my Buccaneers mug. Yes, they didn't make the playoffs, but still sticking with them. Enjoying the coffee mostly, though. Nice. As you know, if you've been around, I like these Yeti-type mugs. Gift that was given to me a while back because it keeps stuff warm. I like a hot cup of coffee, especially not so much today as much as the last couple of days, but these cool mornings, and need that little pick-me-up. And I want to thank you for joining me for a few minutes today. Hopefully this will be a pick-me-up for you, not just from a caffeinated sense, but a reminder of some things, particularly as it relates to who Jesus is and what he has talked to us about, what he's taught us. And that's where we find ourselves these last few weeks, the very end of Matthew's gospel. We're trying to finish this up over the next week or two and look at what is commonly called, in fact, in this version of the Bible, this, I think, NIV, that's our Pew Bible, it's called the Great Commission. These last words Jesus left with his disciples. We've talked about it for a couple of weeks. Let me just read the whole thing, beginning in verse 18, and then we'll pick up where we left off last week. Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." Those words Jesus left with his disciples as Matthew records them right before his ascension into heaven. Their marching orders, their assignment, what they were supposed to do. And we've talked about it, as I said, for a couple weeks. And if you remember last week, we got into a little bit of the grammar. I'm sure you're all loving a little bit of grammar this Wednesday or these Wednesday mornings. And we said in this Great Commission, there's one main verb, make disciples. This idea that Jesus tells his disciples to make other disciples. That old commercial, I think it was a hair commercial or a shampoo commercial. They tell two friends and they tell two friends and so on and so on and so on. That's the model that Jesus left with his disciples. And Paul even said it in 2 Timothy 2:2. It's really easy for me to remember that address in the Bible where he says, "The things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust to faithful individuals who will be able to tell others also." The idea of the Church of Jesus is that it's a replicating process, that these earliest disciples followed Jesus, and when he went to heaven, ascended to heaven after his death and resurrection, they made disciples who made disciples. And here we are 2,000 years later, because generation after generation after generation of followers of Jesus took this commission seriously and made disciples. We said disciples, another word for that, and I've been talking about this on Sunday mornings, if you're part of that, is apprentice. To learn from Jesus. And so we said that's the main verb, to make disciples. The main command, go and make disciples. Then there's three participles that modify the command to make disciples. I slipped up a minute ago and added one. The first one is the word go. And as a participle, maybe a better way to translate it, as we said last week, is going or as you go. So we make disciples not just on Sunday mornings in church, but just as a normal part of life. And then after that, he says, make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So we talked about that. Baptism, that for many people is thought of kind of like the first step of obedience, the first identification with Jesus that you're following him, and even the identification of death and resurrection symbolic in baptism. That was all last week. And we come to the third participle today. It's the beginning of verse 20 where he says, and teaching them. Now, when I say teaching them, you probably think, oh yeah, that makes sense. You go to church and you learn some things. We have an education system in our country. We have an education system in our churches. As I said Sunday, we talk about Sunday school or Bible study. And a lot of times we emphasize in this idea of teaching is the imparting of new information. Like that's what this is about. And you could read this and say, Jesus is saying, yes, we should teach as many as people possible about him. But that's not all he says. Notice he doesn't just say teaching them, like teaching them so they can learn new information. He says teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. Now, I was thinking about a way to illustrate this, and here's my example. New year, myself and maybe others kind of make a resolution, formal or informal. I want to get a little healthier. And if you were to ask me, What do I know about getting healthier? I could tell you a lot of information. I could share with you that to be healthier, I need to eat better. I need to eat more fruits and vegetables and less sweets, and less ice cream. I love ice cream, but fruits and vegetables are better for me than ice cream. I need to drink more water, probably a little less coffee. I hate to give that up, and certainly less than things like soda or super sweet things. And I should probably exercise. Maybe it'd be good for me to walk 30 minutes a day or 40 minutes a day or do some form of exercise. I could relay all of that information to you, but here's the question. Does knowing what I should eat and the calorie count of everything, good or bad, and knowing what I should drink and why water is important, and knowing that I should exercise, and even knowing about the kind of exercise I can do, will that make me healthy? No. What makes me healthier is actually doing those things. So what Jesus is saying is that exact idea. He's not saying, listen, I want you to go and memorize the 10 Commandments. I want you to go and memorize what I say is the greatest commandment. I want you to go and memorize and know the facts about this or that or the other. Because you can memorize the 10 Commandments, but if you still lie, and you still steal, and you still blaspheme, and you still break all of the commandments, don't listen to mom and dad, honor your father and mother, have you done anything? No. You learn some information, but God, through this process and Jesus giving us this commission, isn't just telling us, I want you to learn some new things about me. He's saying, I want you to follow me. I want you to become like me. And that's why he says, don't just teach them about me, but teach them to obey. Teach them to put into practice, like I should put into practice dietary and exercise habits. We should put into practice the things that Jesus teaches us, the commands that he gives us. Because what's happening here is not just imparting information. The goal of following Jesus is being transformed. To be transformed so that a little bit more each day, I become more like him. That's the idea. You've heard me say it in other contexts, and it's one of these sayings that some say maybe it wasn't exactly like this, but it's kind of one of those things that goes around. But I like the sentiment that those who followed teachers in Jesus's day, which were called rabbis, rabbi means teacher, one of the sayings that might have been popular was to say, you should be covered in the dust of your rabbi. The idea is you go and follow so closely behind the one you're learning from. You're with them, you're eating with them, you're doing things with them, you're learning from them. You are trying to become like them, that you are just covered in their dust. You are right up on them. You want to know everything and do everything they do. And I like that sentiment because I think it's summed up here in the Great Commission. Jesus says, teaching them to obey. The idea of following Jesus is transformation, that we should become more and more like him. And the idea of a disciple or an apprentice is that would be the case. If you were thinking, as we've said in other contexts, an apprentice for an electrician or a plumber or any other trade, a mechanic, you know that the goal is one day as an apprentice that you can be a plumber, that you can be an electrician, that you can be a mechanic. You can get the certification, not just because you know the information. Oh, as a mechanic, that's a carburetor, or that's the fuel injection system, or that's the brake line, but that you can get in there knowing that information, put it into practice, and become a mechanic like the person who taught you. And I think that's the idea that's here. Jesus comes and he invites us to follow him. In fact, that's what he says to most of those disciples. Follow me and I will make you fishers of men. He says, follow me because I want you to become like me. I want you to become something. And Jesus in the Great Commission says, main command, go and make disciples. Or make disciples as you go, baptizing them to identify with me, and then teaching them to become like me, to obey all the things that I lived out and that I instructed you to do. That's what discipleship is about. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about it on Sunday mornings a little deeper. I'd love to have you join us for this series. It's called Follow Me, what it means to be a disciple or an apprentice of Jesus. We're kind of going through that sort of thing. And it's what Jesus had in mind here. It's the marching orders for the church. Very important words that Jesus leaves with his disciples. Now, we're going to finish up the Great Commission next week, and I think we'll finish up the entire book of Matthew. I'm going to look it up. I'll try to do that before next week. When did we start going through Matthew? How long have we been meandering our way on Wednesday mornings, 10, 15 minutes at a time through? But I think we're going to finish it up next week, and we'll see the bookends to the Great Commission. He has all authority, and the last phrase of the commission will help us in that. So, hey, I got, a little bit of coffee left, more than I thought. Give me the boost for the rest of my day. I hope this time we've spent together gives you a little boost too. Thanks again for spending these few minutes with me, and I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday.